Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Shona Bhattacharya. He's had several health scares over the last few months, and at 87 years old, Pope Francis knows he may not have much time left to guide the Catholic Church. In the hallways of the Vatican, a so-called end-of-reign atmosphere has descended, with both supporters and detractors eager to make their mark. The Argentine pontiff and his supporters, who sought to lead a revolution of hearts, a more inclusive, welcoming church, are being criticized by those more conservative voices who accuse him of bending doctrine to his will, as well as a certain authoritarianism. Natalia Mendoza, the author of the upcoming report, joins me now. The Holy See has seen its fair share of political games and maneuvering throughout the centuries. Natalia, can we say the Vatican is currently being rocked by internal conflict?
Yes, indeed, Pope Francis is in the middle of an internal conflict in a church torn between progressives and conservatives, with a major challenge in front of him, that of maintaining the unity of a community of 1.3 billion Catholics around the world. A very difficult task, as we are witnessing an escalation of attacks from ultra-conservative circles, with deep criticism against Francis's governance, even more since the death of Benedict XVI at the end of 2022. The pressures on this pontificate have increased, with one main goal: to push Francis to renunciation. For instance, the Argentine Pope resists, showing that he has no intention to live as long as his health allows him to keep leading the Catholic Church.
Natalia, stay with us as we take a look at your report, Vatican, the Deep Divide.
On the 22nd of September 2023, Pope Francis takes off for Marseille with about 60 journalists from around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to draw your attention to some of the safety equipment and procedures.
All specialists on the Vatican, and all in agreement that the papacy is going through turbulent times.
We're beginning to feel that this papacy is approaching its end. There's a battle brewing for the succession, which also means Francis's legacy. What will become of all the Pope's work during this papacy? We've gotten to a phase where a sort of electoral campaign has begun. The Vatican is an elected monarchy by divine right, and therefore a sovereign has to be elected. A king has to be elected by a conclave.
A critical moment, as this battle involves two camps: the conservative traditionalists, who are more and more defiant, and the reformists closer to the Pope. Wherever he goes, he's received with all the honours of a head of state. After 10 years as Pope, Francis chooses each destination with care. This, his 44th foreign trip, is focused on a subject that is dear to him: the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean.
The deaths at sea are not numbers. No, they are names, first names and surnames. They have faces and their own stories. These are ruined lives and broken dreams. People at risk of drowning must be rescued. This is a duty of humanity, a duty of civilization.
The visit was planned by this man, Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline, the Archbishop of Marseille. He's close to the Pope and shares his concern for migrants. Here, in front of the memorial to migrants lost at sea, Francis once again shows his commitment to the cause that certain critics find too political.
The role of the Pope is not to be popular. It's not to please conservatives nor progressives. It's to remind us of the message Jesus gave us. There are people who oppose him, and as soon as the Pope has ideas that they don't agree with, they start saying he has lost his direction, that perhaps he's not a real Pope, and that he's lost his way.
Back at the Vatican, 364 members of the Catholic Church have accepted the Pope's call. A synod, the equivalent of a huge brainstorming workshop. During 3 weeks, bishops, priests, but also laymen and women participate for the first time in the discussions about the future of the Church. Because more and more Catholics from around the world are demanding structural reform.
The Church must accept change. It has to. For example, that priests should be allowed to have a partner or get married. It's important. It would resolve a lot of problems within the Church.
I just don't think that we are seeing the improvements for women in the Church that we should have been seeing by now.
Opinions that have reached the most senior levels of the Church.
Today we're facing situations that raise serious questions. We have to respond to these questions through faith, and so tradition must move forward in a dynamic way. It mustn't remain static. That will mean we can give new answers to new problems.
And that's where things get complicated. Certain subjects that until recently had been taboo are being broached, like the role of women within the Church or the inclusion of sexual minorities. For the ultra-conservatives, it is time to revolt. In this theatre in Rome, just a few metres from St. Peter's Square, several cardinals are publicly expressing their defiance.
Serious mistakes come from inside the Church itself. The flock depends on the courage of its shepherd, who must protect them from the poison of confusion, errors, and division.
A point of view shared by a significant number of practicing Catholics.
We have suffered, as we see it, about the confusion going on in the Church at this moment.
The issues like women deacons and female priests and celibacy are just Trojan horses to bring in LGBTQ, which we believe is the main theme in this synod.
For Dario and Andrea, a homosexual Catholic couple who are raising their 3 children in Rome, this rejection is incomprehensible.
Catholic, gay and lesbian couples exist. When they embark upon a lifelong partnership, just like for any other couple, it's important for them to have a moment when their community officially recognizes and welcomes their union. We bless a child, a car, a house. Why can we not bless a couple who are committing to a lifelong union?
Andrea, an activist and campaigner, wrote to the Pope a few years ago. And to his great surprise, the Pope called him on the telephone.
I asked the Pope if he thought there might be a possibility for the Catholic community to welcome our children, and he replied positively.
Every Sunday, Dario and Andrea go to church in their parish, where their children help the priest.
For us, it's very important to come because I've always thought that faith should exist within a community. It's something that we share and not something to experience alone. And so it's very important for all the family. For a long time, homosexuals were obliged to keep their faith hidden from view. Now it's time for them to be included in the community.
In a letter published this autumn, the Pope asked for reflection and research into different forms of blessings that could satisfy the demands of homosexual couples.
We cannot be judges that only deny, reject, and exclude.
This openness sparked outrage within the traditionalist camp, who sees a danger for the very foundations of the Church.
We have never accepted the benediction of a homosexual union. That goes against God's wishes. It goes against what is clearly stated in the Bible. So, if he opens that door, we have permission to bless homosexual couples. That means the notion of sin in the domain of sexual relations has changed. The Pope is not the master of doctrine. He's the servant of doctrine. He must defend the faith, not dismantle it.
Is he dismantling the faith?
In this sense, yes, because if we say it's okay for homosexuals to live as a couple, that of course implies intimate relations, which would mean that sodomy is not a sin. No, absolutely no. It is still in the Catechism. It is still in the Bible.
The divide between conservatives and reformists is now in the open, and each side is gathering support so that the next Pope will defend their vision of the Church. Today, one of the leaders of the traditionalist cause is this man, Cardinal Robert Sarah from Guinea. He denies being an enemy of the Pope, but is leading a very critical campaign.
Today, there's a real cacophony in the education of priests, pastors, and bishops. The crisis within the Church is entering a new phase, a crisis of pastoral duties.
But Pope Francis is manoeuvring to counter the conservatives, who are more dogmatic. Once a year, he creates new cardinals. This year, on St. Peter's Square, 21 new cardinals were created. Amongst them is Monsignor François Bustillo, who, at 56 years old, is one of the youngest prelates to reach the top of the Catholic hierarchy.
It's a joy for France, it's a joy for the Church, it's a joy for me, it's a joy for Corsica. We need moments of joy. And I experienced the ceremony as a calling. The Church has given new cardinals, not to be bigger or more beautiful, but to be better, and to give the best of ourselves for the Church and for the world.
The Spaniard, José Cobo, was also selected as a new cardinal this year. He has had a dazzling career. In less than 3 months, he was appointed Archbishop of Madrid and then cardinal. He shares the vision of Pope Francis, of a church open to minorities.
The mission of the Church is for everyone, and the Gospel tells us to be open to everyone, and to bring God's grace to all those in need, whatever the labels society has given them.
This year, for the first time since the start of his papacy, cardinals chosen by Francis make up more than 2/3 of the College of Cardinals, the body that elects the next pope. They all have one thing in common. They are pastors working on the ground, close to the Catholic faithful.
These men are distanced from the theological debates, ideology, and dogma. They're very hands-on, and they come from places far from Rome. And the Pope is counting on them to bring a breath of fresh air into the Curia in Rome and in the Sistine Chapel when it comes to electing a new Pope.
Thanks to this new generation of cardinals, who are younger than average, Pope Francis is hoping to ensure that the process of reforms he started will continue after the end of his papacy.
As we just saw, one of the themes central to this internal conflict is homosexual unions and same-sex parent families. The Vatican recently authorized the blessing of same-sex couples. Natalia, is that a huge step forward?
It's a historic pastoral decision. For the first time in 2,000 years, the Catholic Church explicitly authorizes the blessings for same-sex couples. It's a recognition that did not exist until now, at least not at an official level. The announcement was made through a document from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, which indicates some limits. These blessings must be done outside of any ritual, outside of any liturgy, in order to avoid any confusion with the sacrament of marriage. The text reaffirms the traditional teachings of the Church about marriage as the union of a man and a woman. So there's no modification of the doctrine, but rather a clear desire to open the doors of the Church to gay couples and make them feel they have their place within the Catholic community.
Now, Natalia, all this raises the question of who will succeed Pope Francis, a subject over which the Church is deeply divided. Who are the prospective candidates?
It's clear that the electoral campaign for the next conclave has already started. We don't know how long this will last. It will depend, of course, on Pope Francis's health. He's 87 years old. But what we do know is that the next conclave will be different, because during his pontificate, Francis deeply modified the group of cardinals that will elect his successor by increasing the representation of developing countries. And that will force the cardinals to take into account not only the priorities of Western European episcopates, but also those of the churches of the peripheries of the world. Another key point is the fact that there is a divide among those cardinals, among young and old cardinals that don't really know each other. So during the next conclave, they will really have to do some work to get to know each other, get to know the vision of the church of each candidate. And that is why the next conclave will probably be longer and more complex than the previous ones.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Thank you also for your report. Thank you for watching, reporters. Stay tuned to France 24. There's more news coming up.